Welcome to the Attractions Group Podcast. This is episode number 105, alongside Ryan Sir. I'm Don Helbig. Ryan, how you doing?
I am doing very well. I'm looking forward to my trip to Halloween Horror Nights and Disney and all that in a couple weeks. We're going to Mickey's Not So Scary. We discussed that on an episode as well.
Jealous.
Well, and you don't have to be jealous because in a couple days on National Roller Coaster Day, I'll be visiting our friends at Holiday World. You might have heard of them. And we'll be doing some trimless rides on the voyage. So that's really exciting. But speaking of that part of town, you spent quite a bit of time there. Tell us about that.
I did last week. I went down and around, visits to Holiday World. I wanted to see what there was to see and do around the town of Santa Claus, Indiana. And there's a lot. So I visited the Santa Claus Museum and Village. A lot of history there. So definitely recommend checking that out. Toured one of the two remaining Archibees in the United States. Hit Santa's Candy Castle. Got one of those frozen hot chocolates. That was amazing. Toured the Lincoln Pioneer Village and Museum. Again, a lot of history there. And I was not really big on history when I was in school and that. But for me to, do this, I was really impressed with it. Had dinner at a place called S&S Barbecue and Pizza. Highly recommend that if you're in the Santa Claus, Indiana area. Of course, you have to do the Christmas store. And I stayed at the Lincoln Lines Lakeside Resort. That was really nice. Had a cabin, had a lake in the back of it. So it was a really relaxing time there. But no, it was nice. Nice couple days. And you'd be surprised how much there is to see and do in Santa Claus, Indiana when you're going down there to visit Holiday World.
Yeah. And before we bring in our special guests, remind everybody that you can find us on all your favorite podcast apps, Apple, Google, Spotify. You know the drill. Make sure that you follow us on X at attractions_GRP. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Don, tell us about our guest today.
Well, Lehigh Valley is Dorney Park in Wildwater Kingdom. That's where it's at in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It offers two great parks for the price of one. It spans about 200 acres of amusement. And to discuss what this park has to offer, we're thrilled to welcome Ryan Eldredge to the Attractions Group Podcast.
Hey, guys.
Welcome
How we
to
doing?
The show.
Thank you. First time.
Awesome.
Long time.
Yeah, first time, hopefully first of many. But Ryan, let's start off at the beginning. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, especially like what your role is at Dorney Park?
Yeah, so my role at Dorney Park, I always tell people it's like a jack of all trades, master of none, because we wear a lot of hats as the communications manager for Dorney Park, also public relations manager. So my title is Public Relations and Communications Manager at Dorney. However, you do end up handling a lot of different things. So everybody kind of thinks of the crisis stuff that you may have to handle, or just communicating with the media. And that is like the basic surface of what we do. I call it the star on top of the Christmas tree. Underneath the star, there's a lot of different functions and things that we're expected to do, or things that we jump in and help on. So whether that is guest interactions, social media is a big one these days, and that seems to be getting higher up the tree. So we engage with our audience there. We create content for our audience. We also work on different aspects of marketing or content creation. So making sure you get all those cool images of folks on the roller coaster, Iron Menace, right? New for 2024 for us. And then I also do a lot with our community relations and our charitable outreach. So to me, those are two things that are vitally important, making sure that we're engaged with the community, that we're supporting those little things that happen in our community. So whether it's a fundraiser for, the local prom, we're donating tickets if we can, or when it comes to charity, that we're doing some of these volunteer service projects that we've been known for, Camelot for Children. Every year we go out there, we clean up the property, or doing something like a Kid Again, where we bring in children and their families with terminal or life-threatening illnesses for a day at the park. So that's probably the basic of the role, but I certainly enjoyed. And then we just, facilitate really good relationships. I always say, I guess my job at the park is either to be the court jester, the rodeo clown, or the glue that holds everybody together. So just try to keep things positive and keep us moving forward as a team.
So Ryan, talk about what you were doing before Dorney Park, and what that transition was like for you to go from what you were doing and then entering the amusement park industry.
Yeah, so I did a variety of great question, Don. I did a variety of different roles. All of them were in some aspect related to communications. They were all communications related jobs or journalism. Working as I've worked as a producer for a television station. I've been a videographer, photographer. I've done a number of different roles. The role I had just before I started at Dorney Park was actually working for Governor Tom Wolf, who was Pennsylvania's former governor. And while I was there, the last role that I held was as a deputy press secretary. And I specifically was helping with the rollout of the vaccine for COVID-19. And, whether your political objections or your leanings, whatever that means to you, certainly my goal was just to make sure that we were putting people in a position to effectively communicate how to get access to it, where to be, and then making sure that we would stage things so we could talk about where those were, what numbers look like, those kinds of things. So it was an interesting role. I'll be honest with you and candid. At the end of the day, it really wasn't for me. I'm not a super political person, not really motivated by those things. Certainly, love communications, and I learned a lot in that role, but vastly different from what I'm doing at the theme park in some aspects. I think it's, there's things that definitely correlate. The community relations aspect, I think, has been really similar for me, and making sure that we have those good bonds within the community, and then just at the park in general with our guests, and then with amongst our team. So learned a lot of good things there. The theme park world, though, is very unique. And I always tell people are like, did you ever? I think a lot of people grow up and they go to theme parks, and I went to theme parks. I never lived close enough to one where it would have been like my summer job, which is unfortunate. But I was always about an hour away from Hershey and about an hour away from Dorney, kind of in that middle ground and southern Chester County, Lancaster area. So just never really came up, but love doing it. Love being at theme parks. I grew up loving theme parks. Just never, I guess I never really thought it was I didn't know it was a job. I guess you don't know what you don't know. And so just trying to look for something different and something to kind of just change things up, change up the cadence, find a job that, wasn't maybe so boring or so rigid or had just government. The one thing I always tell people, there's a lot of oversight. So you can't just kind of just create something from scratch, and there's just a lot of people involved in the process. So to be able to do that in this role has been exciting, and to work with people who are creative always kind of gets things moving. There are so many incredibly talented and creative people at theme/amusement parks.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been a heck of a journey. Dorney Park is one of 14 trolley parks left still operating in the United States. Can you talk about kind of the history of Dorney Park and how that relates to it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll go back quickly. I'll try not to make it this a long answer, because when you have 140 years history, you can make it take forever. But 1884 just started out as something small, just kind of a stop for folks. And Solomon Dorney had this idea to put, it's like, did he have this idea for attractions, or was it just kind of like a respite? One of the things that people, if they look us up, they'll see the natural spot comes up. So one of the things that we were known for was just being a natural spot, a spot where people could kind of park it. You're down by Cedar Creek. Eventually we would get the trout pond. And then eventually over time, you start to add attractions. We had the Castle Garden, which is like a dance hall, and you could dine and hang out. And that was a big deal for people. And then slowly you start adding the whip, and you add the coaster, and you're just adding these different rides and attractions. And from there, it kind of blossomed and became something more. I'd say where things maybe really changed was right around the time of the Great Depression, and it's credited with saving the park. We get the Zephyr. And I think that certainly changed kind of the dynamics of the park. But yeah, to have that rich history, and trolleys were so huge in the Lehigh Valley, especially when you talk about Bethlehem Steel and how you would get workers to and from suburban areas. And then beyond Bethlehem, obviously Allentown, where you're seeing a lot of the byproduct from Bethlehem Steel, and how that's utilized and changed and tweaked and altered. And a lot of the folks would have worked in those industries, and that's how they would get to and from, and use that trolley to get to the leisure of Dorney Park. And I think it's really impressive. It's cool that you can tell all these stories. You just keep going back and back and back. I'm sure you guys will ask a question about Thunderhawk, 100 years old this year / the coaster, which I think is funny. If you start looking that up, it's like 1989. We changed the name to Thunderhawk, which has got to be the most 80s thing of all time. But you just kind of can go through all that history. And I think it's really special. And for me, it makes me love the park more, because I'm sure you guys are going to have questions about rides. And honestly, my go-to answer is just all the memories that you have of those rides, or talking with your family. Like a lot of us can say like, hey, I rode on that ride with my grandfather. And that's really, really special. So the park has just so much history dating back to 1884. And so, yeah, the trolley aspect of that is huge. But I also don't want to underscore the fact that I don't think Solomon Dorney could have ever seen where we are today. It's incredible.
This year's big addition, Iron Menace, I want to tell you, Ryan, I thought you did a fantastic job, starting with the teaser campaign all the way through, keeping your audience in the loop in terms of the construction progress. By the time you opened, everybody knew that Dorney Park had a new coaster, Iron Menace. So what has the feedback been now that's been open?
It's really interesting. Came out blazing. Everybody loved it. The feedback's great. I think the biggest thing with the ride is that it informs the direction of the park. That it's really the first time that we have gotten into dynamic theming. And I think really for us, I mean, we've kind of done it in unique ways, but for us, it's the first time we've really tapped into the community in a way that really resonates with all of us. And I always say it's so funny because it just seemed like such a slam dunk to theme something to the steel industry, which obviously has such a rich, I hate to say history again, but it's such a rich history. It's such a big part of who we are as a community that it's almost baffling that we didn't do it sooner. So that part of it, the theming, has gone over really well. The roller coaster itself, general public loves it. And early on, we would get really great feedback from, folks in the industry, influencer types, content creators, people that wrote it. We had a huge media day on April 17th. It went really well. And, subtly through time, I think people like to get engagement. So a couple people take pot shots here and there, and that's fine. I think the ride for what it is, I think some of the misconception is that we were, and maybe Don, maybe this just kind of is attributed to, this is my first rodeo doing a roller coaster rollout. I'll be honest with you on that, but maybe it has to do with how much we did to be transparent about the process and how much we did in the teasers, that people got this idea that we were trying to compete with a Top Thrill 2 or some of these bigger roller coasters that were either going to be constructed or were constructed and aren't running, or whatever it was for 2024. The reality was we always sold this as this was the perfect roller coaster for Dorney Park, and our community, specifically in the Lehigh Valley, Philadelphia, New York, they agree. Our guests love it. The feedback's been great on it. Yeah, it's a little short, but the great part is that it is a people mover. And so, you're not in line too terribly long. It's not like you're in an hour plus long line, 25, 30 minutes max we've seen. And if you really want to get on it again, you get on it again. And you always kind of notice something different, because normally on the first go around, you're just like, holy cow, that drop is amazing and it's intense. And you kind of like, you're going through the versions and you kind of forget about like what you're doing. So you almost have to get it on it again to be like, okay, this time when I get on, when I'm on the incline loop, I want to like look down and see if the Zephyr's down there. And when I go through the Immelman, like I kind of actually want to think about like what's happening to my body. So I've noticed that too, that the re-rideability is really high, and people like to get it on it a second or third time. Station Q is beautiful. The lighting package is great. Certainly there's things that we want to add on as we move forward. You just kind of, you do the construction process, you get everything cleared, and there's still little things that you want to do, and you kind of get the off season coming up to maybe add some things in terms of theming, and we're really looking forward to that.
So you mentioned that in your core markets, Pennsylvania, New York, and so on, it's gone over really well.
Oh yeah.
Has it served the park in a manner beyond that? Like, have you noticed that more people are coming from outside where they normally would, like a normal radius, to come to Dorney Park specifically for Iron Menace, especially this year?
Yeah. So some of the outer markets where we've seen kind of an influx this year would be like your Scranton or your Harrisburg. One thing I've seen a lot are people are like, man, I haven't been there in years. And so oftentimes what we do is our group sales team is incredible, and they will get folks on field trips from central Pennsylvania and northeast Pennsylvania. And so, people will come here when they're 16, 17 years old, and then they live an hour and 15, hour and 30 away, and they may have another park that's their home park, right? Knoebels, Hershey, Dutch Wonderland even, right? So they might be going to some of these other parks with their small children or whatever. And it just kind of like gave us a reason to get back in their ear and say like, hey, just, come out for that visit again and revisit Dorney Park, relive some of those memories that you created when you were, middle school, high school, elementary school. And we've seen a lot of that. We've seen a lot of folks from the Baltimore area, which I've been pleasantly surprised with. For me, obviously I work in the PR world, so I get the pleasure of working with some groups and some folks who travel across the country. I've seen way more of that this year. We've had some big groups from Europe this year. A lot of them say it's the first time they've been back in like 14, 15 years, 10 years, 7 years, nothing close. And we've seen a lot of people, as you guys know, there are a lot of folks who work in the industry as content creators out of Texas, California, and Florida. Seen a ton of them this year too. Folks that haven't necessarily got out here in a long time. So that's been really cool. We always get a good influx of people from Ohio and North and South Carolina. And I've kind of noticed a little bit of an uptick from them this year too. A lot of them will come on, the All Park Passport or the Prestige Pass or whatever they have and make their way to Dorney. Just, specifically the Cedar Point people love to come for like Demon Drop, right? So it's just interesting. But we've noticed that folks who are in the family, in the Cedar Fair family, Six Flags family, have kind of found a way to get to Dorney because they just want to try the new roller coaster. So it's been fun.
You mentioned Thunderhawk turned 100 this year. I remember riding it before it was called Thunderhawk. How did you celebrate this major milestone? And you also had to kind of probably balance it out a little bit because you were opening Iron Menace, and you probably didn't want this to get lost in the shuffle. So how did you handle that?
It's like PR, Don. Yeah. So I had so many questions. Like early in the season, I was really kind of mum on it. Just would slightly acknowledge it subtly and things, but my whole goal from the beginning of the season is like keep the main thing the main thing. Early in the season, the main thing was Iron Menace. And what we did early in the season was we placed some things dynamically around the ride. So we constructed a timeline wall. We put up signage around Thunderhawk that commemorated the fact that it was its 100th anniversary. We had some pole banners and things that were around the park that would acknowledge it. The landing page changed, obviously, for Thunderhawk on the website. But we were really careful not to step on our own toes. So once Iron Menace was out, it was launched, and the media had kind of had their crack at it. The public had really gotten their first ride. Then we regrouped. I had formed a committee along with my general manager and VP, Jessica Naderman, for Thunderhawk's 100th celebration because we really thought it was critical to have all parts involved. And what we did from there was, I made a couple phone calls. Ace does an event every year in the spring. They do a great job. They usually call it Clowning Around. And I worked with Elizabeth Ringus and Mike Matshurts, who is our Eastern Pennsylvania rep, and Elizabeth is the president. And we just talked about like, hey, when you guys do your event, what we would love is to have a built-in audience for some type of event for Thunderhawk. And they were like, that'd be great. We would love it. So we started trying to strategize a great time. We found late June, which I thought was perfect because at this point, you don't want to over message. So we had Iron Menace. We're talking about opening. We have Ride for a Cause. So the Philadelphia Eagles are in the park. We get through that. Now it's like, now you're opening the water park. Now you have opening day. All the rides are open. You're moving. Now it's like early June. And so now it's like, all right, now I feel safe to start messaging, which is perfect because June 20th, June 21st is when we had the Thunderhawk celebration. So on that day, we had specialty food items. We had a VIP catered meal for our special ACE guests, and then a lot of like our local representatives, folks that have been instrumental in making sure that ride continues to operate, like Philadelphia Toboggan. Tom and Janine Rebbe were there. It was really cool. So we had like an official onstage presentation. We gave them a plaque. Still waiting for their official one, by the way, because that thing got messed up. So just in my brain right there, I was like, yeah, actually, they still have to get that. But we had a little presentation with them. We got some citations from some local government officials. We had a band there. We had an actual hawk came out to the park and did a little presentation, which was stressful for the hawk because I guess it's never been around roller coasters before. So that was a learning experience. We had commemorative pins for the first 1,000 riders on Thunderhawk. some special announcements made in the station. And so overall, really cool day. Had the Hawk radio station out that day, and we had like a mini museum that we constructed and worked with some partners to get in some relics from Dorney Park's past in. So overall, we just try to really make it a special one day on Saturday, and then Sunday we still left out some of the things to kind of commemorate Thunderhawk, and a lot of it's still up just to kind of let people immerse themselves in that experience and just to acknowledge the ride and longevity that it's had.
Very cool. Now, speaking of old rides, the Whip. So that's been around since 1920, oldest ride in the park. What makes that so special? Like, tell me about that ride experience.
So, well, I mean, personally for me, I know some parks have actually taken out their whips, even in our area. And to me, a lot of these older rides are the soul of the park. They're at the core of what makes the park so special. And like, all right, I know some of these people are like paid actors, but like some of those faces are legitimately, when you go and stand there and you watch the whip run, there's nothing better than like watching two people try not to squish each other, knowing that there's like no way that they're not going to squish each other. And I think also like what makes this ride so special and the longevity is our maintenance team. We've got guys that have been with us for 30 or 40 years, and their ability to keep a ride like the Whip or the coaster / Thunderhawk or Demon Drop running on a regular basis, like it's a labor of love to find like engines and parts, and watching them to go through the things that they need to go through to keep these things running day in and day out is really special. I actually got to ride it with my son for the first time. He just never really seemed interested about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it was just really special experience. And in that moment, I thought, this is the kind of thing that we talk about that makes this park so special, that he'll have that memory with me. And, hopefully one day when he comes to the park, and this has been the case, as you said, for a century, he'll be able to share that same experience with his son. And you see a lot of that too. The folks in line and the people who ride Whip, it's such a great age spectrum because they'll be younger. And then you've got folks who are older that can still tolerate that little whip. And so I just think it's just a special ride. And I'm so glad that we get to preserve it in that space in the lower half of the park. It's just so cool. You've got center stage, you've got the Whip, and you've got Thunderhawk, and then even the Scrambler. You've got just some really good hardware that kind of represents what we're all about. And really, it's like cool. In 2024, you can still get a taste of the 1920s, right? It's unusual.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned Demon Drop, originally at Cedar Point. One of my favorite rides when it was there. You've got that 60-foot drop, 2.5 seconds. The descent's 99 feet. It was just a beloved attraction there. But how popular is it with your guests?
Well, Don, it's hit or miss. I think the younger generation, I'm not sure that they quite appreciate it. Like, we see a lot of folks who are Gen X. They love it. They love it because it is like the memory of like the 1980s. Seeing like that first gen Intamin is like, oh man, like I feel like I'm in the 1980s. And like I said, we get this pool of not just people who are enthusiastic about theme parks, but also just like folks from Ohio who are like, man, when I went to Cedar Point, this was like the it ride. And then obviously folks that are, just been coming to the park for a long time. I think they really appreciate the ride. I'm not going to lie to you and say that like ridership's really high or anything like that, but the people who are passionate about it are like really passionate about it. And like they're adamant that when they come, that they get on Demon Drop right away. And it's actually interesting the way that the maintenance works. We have one guy specifically, Jim Efting, who is like, it's his baby. And he's like adamant that it's like one of his final checks of the morning, and he wants to like get the ride running. So sometimes like it'll be one of the rides that's later to open. Not sometimes, most days it's like one of the rides that's later to open. People will be in a panic. Like, is Demon Drop going to open today? I'm like, oh yeah, 100% it's going to open today. I'm like, guaranteed Jim is like over there right now. And they're like, yeah, there's a guy over there. Do you have white hair? I'm like, yep, that was. Yeah. I'm like, it's his final check. He is so passionate about keeping that ride running specifically. A lot of it, I did ask him. We did a feature on him and his son Josh, who are father-son duo. They both work on our maintenance team. I was like, what will you care so much about Demon Drop? Like, I don't get it, because we have the whip and Thunderhawk and all this other stuff. And he actually was on the crew that helped build it at Dorney when all the pieces were sent over from Cedar Point. So it's special to him. And that's cool. And I think that pride that our team has in these older rides, even ones that are like a retread or whatever Possessed is another great example of that, right? It's not necessarily our ride, but our guys, Mike Hartcorn is our electrician. He takes a lot of pride in keeping that ride running. And I think that kind of makes our park a little bit different in that regard.
Yeah, I have to admit, so Demon Drop was one of my favorite rides at Cedar Point when I first visited. The first time I visited was right before it got moved to Dorney. So I have very fond memories of it. And then Possessed, that was from Geauga Lake, right?
Yes. That was California for like a year and then came. Yep.
Yeah, so that ride's like a fair ride. It's been around. But that was one of my favorite rides at Geauga Lake too. So you guys are like nostalgic for me, and I haven't even been there.
Yeah.
So speaking of ride anniversary, so the Ferris wheel turned 35 this year. What is the Ferris wheel meant for the guests and the park?
So I wish the Ferris wheel, to be transparent with you, was in a little bit of a better spot. It's kind of like as you're coming down the hill, a little bit out of the way. But I think the biggest thing with the Ferris wheel, it's not really about like the age or anything like. I'm not going to go out there and pretend like it's the most special ride on planet Earth. But there's nothing like getting on a Ferris wheel ride. If you're a teenager and you're in love, I guess the Ferris wheel is probably great. If you're with family and friends, nothing better than parking it up at the top. And on our Ferris wheel specifically, it's like one of the very few places outside of Talon where you'll really be able to see the extent of the entire park, because Steel Force is all the way down at kind of like the bottom of the mountain. We call it Cardio Hill. And so when you're on top of the Ferris wheel, and you're not on a roller coaster either, right? So it's not like it's just got a second. You better look real quick and you can see it. It's like you've got time to really ingest it. You can see Iron Menace. You can see Possessed. You can see Steel Force. You can see the coaster, Thunderhawk. You can see the whole lower half of the park. And then if you just turn and look the other way, or if you're looking out straight, depending on which direction you're facing, it's like you'll see Talon. You'll see Hydra. You can see the water park. So to me, that's really what that ride is all about. It's about being up there and just being able to absorb how large the park is, and really just being able to see all the rides you love, just take it in, enjoy the smells while you're up there. And it's a great, like I said, we love our classic rides. Maybe this is low key my favorite thing about our Ferris wheel though, is that it's got a really cool lighting package that we can pretty much change it to any lights we want. And every time one of our teams from Philly is in a playoff run, we get to switch it out. And I always like to go out there and Mike, our electrician, goes and he's like tinkering with it and trying to make sure like the lights are correct. And he goes to Dominator and he does the same thing, and goes to a couple other little rides and make sure all the colors sync up. So when the Eagles were on their Super Bowl run, like it was fun. That was my first year, changing everything over to green. So like that to me was special. It's like when you see the Ferris wheel lit up green or red or blue or orange, you're like, you're like, all right, man, somebody's on a run. They're about to break they're about to win the whole thing.
Well, you haven't used the orange lately, have you, with the Flyers?
Don, probably should just retire the orange, man.
That's right. Let's talk about Hydra. It's the first and only floorless roller coaster in Pennsylvania. It's a standout, I think, in your coaster lineup. So tell me more about it, and where does it rank for you on your list of coasters at Dorney Park?
So I always joke that Hydra's like, it's all downhill from the JoJo roll, but the JoJo roll is so dynamic. It's incredible coming out and you're just spinning so slow, and, hopefully you don't have any change in your pocket and you just feel like you're stuck on those restraints and you're in the air. And it's such an incredible experience, like just such a cool sense of weightlessness. And then you got 7 other really dynamic inversions. You got 105-foot drops. So it packs a punch. That signature green paint job really pops in the park. And plus the history of the name Hydra the Revenge has to do with, obviously, Hydra in this case slayed Hercules, right? Because Hydra came and replaced our Hercules roller coaster back in the early 2000s. So there's a lot of history in that ride, even though, it wasn't erected fully until 2005. So a lot of folks, I will say this is like Hydra, even though the height limit is 54 inches, it ends up being like a lot of kids' first like thrill coaster, because when they're 11, 12, 13, 14, not every kid's just like gung-ho to jump on a roller coaster. My daughter actually is the key example. She didn't want to do Talon, didn't want to do Steel Force, and so we just would chat with her, and you can see Hydra from the midway really well, and you can kind of see like, okay, it's not flying. Like you can see people's faces. Everybody gets off, they enjoy it. It's like they had a good time. Nobody's like, whoa, man, that was intense. And so I think it's going to have, and I think you're already seeing it, especially with Gen Z and millennials, that there's a lot of core or key memories tied to that roller coaster, because for a lot of them, that's going to be their first, steel roller coaster with a multiple inversions. And so I think you're right, Don. Like it's definitely a staple of Dorney, and it's certainly top 5 for me. Not that we have much more than that, but depending on, kind of my mood, I think it toggles with Possessed. If it's early in the morning, I'd rather ride Hydra for sure. If it's later in the evening, I'll probably take Possessed just because you got the launch and you can see Iron Menace. But those two are, I'd say they're kind of tango in there at 4 and 5 for sure.
All right. Second oldest ride, the Carousel. It's a dental carousel company, 1921. So it's a year younger than the Whip. Tell us about your carousel. I'd love to hear more about it.
Well, I don't know how much you know, Ryan, but that one wasn't originally ours. That one is also a transplant from Cedar Point. Ours caught on fire during one of 2 fires in the 80s. So there's a lot of, theories on all that. But it's an incredibly beautiful carousel, and it's right when you walk into the park. So, like, what is more American than walking through a main gate and right in front of you is the carousel? I mean, there's nothing better. It's got the built-in organ. And then what I love is that we repaint large portions of it every year. It's actually like one of my favorite things to capture as like a photographer or videographer. We have ladies every year that come in and they hand paint them. They hand paint the horses or the lion or the benches. And then there's the little backgrounds that are up against the apparatus itself. So they like touched a little creek on there, and you're thinking, who in the world would even know that you did that if we didn't document it? But it's really incredible the amount of work that they put into keeping it operating, and it runs smooth. You wouldn't know it's 100+ years old. Whereas sometimes you could ride Thunderhawk and you'd be like, all right, that's a century on that bad boy. But yeah, you'll never feel that way riding the carousel. It's genuinely an antique. It is beautifully preserved. The horses are incredible. Just like, you walk up and you're looking at it and it's just pristine. And that's just another example. I hate to keep going back to our maintenance team, but they blow me away sometimes how much they care about just the little details and the landscaping around the carousel. All of it works really well. And once again, just one of those rides where there's just memories for decades now of, mom holding son on the horse, or, granddad sitting on the bench behind them, or whatever. And we see those comments all the time when you share pictures of the ride on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. You'd be like, man, I remember getting on there with my mom, 25 years ago. And that's special. And I think that's, just once again speaks to kind of the nature of Dorney Park.
It's one of my favorite carousels, and you're right. When you walk in, I mean, it's just, just that dominating presence there, right? So you have a history of 130 years. So obviously, if you're like a lot of other, cities, sometimes, people resist change. So how has Dorney Park balanced preserving its heritage while putting in new, attractions like Iron Menace? So how do you balance that to keep everybody happy? Like, you're not destroying the history and tradition and everything, but also, you keep moving forward.
It's actually, I guess I think it's harder than people realize, because younger generations don't necessarily have the same attachment that the older generations do. And we have things that, at some point just you can't maintain it anymore. And it's so difficult. It is heartbreaking when, you've got to let a ride go. Certainly it's like for us, it's the last option. I know that's not the case for every park, but it's just like, we want to keep that stuff there as long as humanly possible, because as I've said, that is what makes our park special. And I've been to parks before where they do not have the wealth of older rides like we do, and they have great rides, and a lot of them have better roller coasters and better thrill attractions and whatever, better IP, but there's a piece of their soul that it feels like they're missing. And when you walk through Dorney, you just are like, memories just wash over you, because the way that Dorney is, there are large pockets of the park that are still the same from when I was 8 years old to now when I'm 36. And I think that's really important to remember, that when we're making decisions, that although there's a push to retheme things and to add in dynamic rides, we've got to keep in mind like what makes us special. And that is that we are a community park, that we are the natural spot, that we're the escape for folks from Philadelphia and New York. And to not forget that scenic beauty and the things that make us really special. So it's a balancing act. Fortunately for us, I think a lot of times the rides have kind of sunset themselves without really us having to do anything. Like Stinger, great example of that. Like the thing just was not operating. There's nothing we could do. Our maintenance team tried ridiculously hard, just could not make it work. And well, what do you know? Now you got a nice sweet plot of land and put another roller coaster in there in 6 years. So sometimes it just kind of works out in our favor. And, sometimes you do have to make tough decisions, but overall, I think if you keep the main thing, and remember that there's so much rich history in the park and you want to preserve that, I think at the end of the day, people will realize that, acknowledge it. We see stuff that's like, I miss Old Dorney, and I'm sure you do. But if Old Dorney stayed Old Dorney, there wouldn't be any Dorney left, because all of those rides would have probably fallen over except for about 3 of them, which is why there's only 3 left.
That's right.
So just kind of how it goes.
So you mentioned a couple roller coasters. You had Stinger, where I guess the train ended up at Kings Island, which is our home park. So we're taking good care of her, I'm sure.
That's good.
So talk about, the coasters of Dorney Park, and, how they service the guests in terms of like, do you have them for like every age group and stuff? Like, how's your collection essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a really good collection. And I think what helps us is that we've got some things that have been dynamic first. So Hydra was Pennsylvania's first floorless, and Steel Force was the tallest on the East Coast for a long run. Maybe not as long as I'd like to think, but it had a couple years. We have Talon, which is just one of the first, and one of the just an incredible invert. So smooth, quiet, really offers a dynamic ride. So it's kind of like you got Steel Force and Talon are kind of at the top of like that thrill. And then Menace came up too. It's super intense and it's a thrill ride, but it's got the 48-inch height requirement. So I think, like I was talking about with kids and Hydra being their first, big boy, big girl coaster, I think Iron Menace is going to be that kind of for the next generation. A lot of them are probably going to get on it because they hit that height requirement. And we all know there's little daredevils that, they might be 8-9 years old and they hit 48 inches. They're going to get on that thing. So that's really cool to see. And then I think after that, and maybe Possessed is kind of in that thrill too. It's like you got Hydra. I do think, and I think everybody would agree, I do think we need a more thrilling family coaster than Woodstock Express. And Wild Mouse, depending on who you ask, some people think Wild Mouse is the scariest thing of all time, and some people think it's lame. So maybe that's somewhere in the middle there with Hydra. But I think there's got to be one more thing to kind of like get you to that Hydra Wild Mouse level. I would love to see us get something in that kind of territory. But outside of that, I think it's a great roller coaster lineup. It's fun. A lot of people say like, hey, you can go there and you can get all those coasters in one day and enjoy yourself and not be standing in line all day. And so I think that is to our advantage. And I think it's a great line. I still think, to me, I've ridden a lot of roller coasters in my life, and Steel Force and Talon have always been in my top 10. And obviously some of that's nostalgia, but I just think that they are, for what they are perfect. And, the hope was that Iron Menace was the same thing.
Yeah, if you've got a good lineup there, let's talk about Wildwater Kingdom. It's one of the largest water parks in the Northeast, included with your park admission there. So how does that enhance the overall value and experience for your guests?
Well, maybe the question is, how does Dorney Park enhance the value and overall experience of the guests? Because, man, we hit June, and it is water park first. We are Wildwater Kingdom and Dorney Park from basically Memorial Day weekend through Labor Day weekend. You'll be looking at our attendance numbers, and I'm just throwing numbers out, but if you had 10,000 in the park, 7 to 8 are in the water park. We've got 2 lazy rivers, 2 wave pools, so many incredible slide structures. We've got a variety of different kids play apparatuses. So it is a really special water park. And the great thing is that we recognize what an asset it is. And I think folks who know Dorney really well have recognized that too. That, we'll go on runs where a lot of our key investments are in the water park. And so we freshened up paint last year. That's something we're really, critical about. We've added bars in the last 2 years and places to get something to eat. We've added entertainment with a stage. We actually had 2 stages. So there's it's just kind of like it's a vibe. It's a place where you can go and you can cool off, and it's a special part of what makes us great. Certainly we don't have the surf competitions anymore like we did in the 80s. But we had like a Meg 2 screening last year because our wave pool from 1985 is so big you can do those kinds of things. So it's a draw. It is certainly a draw. And I find that a lot of people prefer to get a season pass to Dorney Park and take advantage of Wildwater Kingdom than they do to get a membership to their local pool. Because you just have so much more that you can do while you're there. And of course, if you get a season pass, parking's free. So we just see a lot of people taking advantage of it. It is a weapon. It's an absolute asset to our park.
Absolutely. Now, so Cedar Fair and now Six Flags parks, including Legacy Parks.
I keep doing it too. It's so good.
No. I meant them as separate entities. So Cedar Fair Legacy Parks,
yep,
and now Six Flags parks, such as Six Flags Fiesta and so on, have been enhancing the culinary experience.
Yes.
Can you tell me about the culinary experience at Dorney Park?
So we just got a new executive chef, Allison Poe. She actually came over from Kings Island, and so what we have been trying to do. And we actually kind of expanded out. This is also in our merchandise world as well, is to incorporate more local flavors or local cuisine. And that's something we've really tasked everybody in our food and beverage team. So finding local partners, so Tasty Cake, Funk Brewing, and then we've got others too, finding other local, not finding local partners, but finding partners. Freezing with Aubrey is a great example. She is from Kentucky, but she's been freeze drying Tasty Cakes for us. So making sure that we're tapping into those local flavors, local cuisines has been really important. And then making sure that we've got things that are authentic or better fare than just, I know we do burgers and nuggets really well, but making sure that people have options that are a little more elevated. So whether that's a pulled pork sandwich, a pierogi, flatbread pizza, really good, hand dipped wings or fried, all that kind of stuff. Just making sure that we're doing that well. In addition to the things that people love, funnel cake is the number one at Dorney Park. If somebody said, "Hey, what do you guys sell more of than anything else?" It's nothing super. The news stations always ask me "What's the hottest thing at Dorney Park?" It's funnel cake, man. Funnel cake all day, every day. But if we can do some other things a little more elevated and better, I think it really plays into really the community. We're trying to have a broad-based community. You don't just want one set group. You want other people to come and try it. And one of the ways to do that too is through our events. So last year we did Grand Carnival, which had so many different flavor profiles and things you could do. This year we're doing Summer Nights, and with that we're doing a lot of Hispanic and Latin American cuisine. So things from Puerto Rico and Guatemala, empanadas, all those things, jerk chicken, things that people love. And we're able to do that because we have a talented culinary staff. And I think it's boding well for us. Obviously we probably started later than some of the other big guys. We've kind of seen ebb and flow there. But I think over the last year or 2 years, we've really improved. And we got the Iron Mill Grill and Bar this year, and a lot of folks have loved it. It's our new bar and our new restaurant. It's down by Iron Menace, and it's got some really great food. And I'm not just saying that because that's my job. I've been there, I've eaten there a couple times, and it's probably my favorite spot in the park this year.
I was going to say, Dorney Park, they host a variety of Halloween, different events, but Halloween Haunt is one of them. So if you're a monster living in the like Allentown area, you want to talk to them right now, don't you?
We're actually actively hiring right now. So every year we get hundreds of monsters, and I think while the monsters are great, we're also always looking for folks who are interested in doing rides and food and beverage and merchandise and all those things too. Because what happens is a lot of our high schoolers and our college age students go back to school, and so we need to supplement them and bring people in. And we've had great success doing that every year. This is traditionally we kind of start late July and kind of push through August to get them onboarded and get them ready to go for this year will be Friday the 13th. So yeah, I mean, if you're a monster and you're in the Lehigh Valley, it is by far my favorite event of the year. Our fall festivities are incredible because of the scenic beauty of Pennsylvania alone. But anybody who's been in the Lehigh Valley knows there's just always this tinge of like horror, hauntings, paranormal, because we're in the Northeast and we're old and there's just a lot of things. And you tie that into haunt, and it's just a recipe for success. But the park is beautiful. You got the creek there, so you kind of already get some natural fog, and then you pump some extra in, and it's an incredible event. So yeah, I would recommend it, man. If you're a monster and you want to have some fun and scare some people, Dorney Park's not a bad spot to look.
So the trend in the industry seems to be going towards like more immersive experiences. Obviously, you guys went that direction with Iron Menace. Can you talk about the process by which the decision to make it an immersive experience and not just slapping an IP on it or something like that? And the decision-making process around that?
So we did a brand study for Dorney. And when I say we, I mean corporate and our Dorney Park team. What we found really interesting was that there were some key characteristics. A lot of them had to do with basically being neighborly, being local, and being historic. And so, as you said, we kind of see the trend of the industry, which is to say that folks really appreciate theming. And I think it's fine to say people appreciate theming, but you got to think of it from like a business standpoint. Why is it important? Why theming, right? And I think for us, it's like it can inform so much about what you're doing. And when things come together, it's just that sense that it was done well, that it was thought out, instead of just here's a new bar, here's a new gift shop, here's a new ride, whatever. We'll call it Hawk, and just call it gift shop. Which is, we were great at that in the 90s and the 2000s. We would have taco stands called Taco. So to see us move into that, I think is encouraging. But then to make sure that it was tied tastefully into the community. And one of the things that we actually did that I thought was really impressive, I mean, obviously we have a creative design team. Ken Parks has been with Cedar Fair for a while. I love the guy. I love picking his brain. He's so smart and savvy. He's a storyteller. Him and Clayton Lawrence, who's another one that works in our creative design team, they came up to the park and they would talk to us. And I think they really did listen to our feedback to talk about like, hey, what, does this part of, Ken's writing the backstory, does this make sense? Or like, does this fit? And they went to the steel stacks in Bethlehem, and we met with the National Museum of Industrial History, and they brought some pieces in. They're actually on display at Dorney Park. Making sure that all those things were right, I think, was just as important as saying like, hey, we're theming. To make sure that the community was invested in that storytelling, I think was critical. And I think that's why maybe it's a little more successful than just, like you said, just slapping an IP or doing something like that. So I think theming is important. It'll inform our decision-making moving forward. I think because of the success and the way that we see it, I think we'll continue to do it that way.
So Ryan, as the person in charge of communications, how do you engage with the park's community, and what role does social media play in shaping Dorney Park's public image?
Social media, I think, plays a big role. And I always say Dorney Park's like home. And what better way to make people feel like it's home than creating a community? So my biggest thing, especially for our park, is to make folks feel like they're acknowledged, to make them feel like they're accepted, to make them feel like they're valued. So I'm really big on engagement. making sure that even if we don't correspond with actual words, that we recognize the comments, that we try to get in there and let people know. Now, sometimes it's a runaway train and you just can't keep up. But I think it's really important. And I think storytelling on social platforms is just as equally as important. As you said, Don, we were really adamant that we go through that construction process and tell that story. So one of the things that I did up front was work with our contractor and our construction director to say, hey, we want to be a part of this. We want to film this. We want cameras here. What do I need to do to make sure that I can do that? And that I had one part-timer to make sure that she also has access to the site so that we're rolling and we're capturing things and we can interview people. And so we worked really well as a team to make sure that happened. And that's no different on a regular basis. So when it came to our new event, Summer Nights, like who can we talk to? Who can we get on camera? How do we get the setup? So that people kind of get the sense that of what we do as a park, but then they can also, a lot of these people too that work here, they're all members of the community too. So when people can see, grandpa doing an interview about a new ride, or, mom is interviewing about the new merch that she has on display, or whatever it is, all that stuff ties in, and it's just as equally as special. And then you can tell those stories on social media. I've always been really big on videography and photography and telling a story. It's like a hobby or passion of mine. So I just think, keeping in line with that, we need to see ourselves more as content creators. That we're like a content hub. There's constantly stuff happening at a theme park. We always say like we're like a mini city during the operating season. And the best way to let people know that is to tell a continuous story throughout the season. So we really have worked on that a lot. And I think, we've been successful as a brand. And then we bring our media partners in too. We do the same thing. I remember when I first got into it, you realize that there's people who don't like certain people or whatever. And I can't believe that you worked with person X. And my whole principle is that we give everyone a chance, that we try to get as many people in here to talk about the park as possible, because as I said, we lead with kindness and we want everybody to feel like they're family. And, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And so hopefully that vets out, and that I think you do see it. I think people have a positive disposition about the park. We're not the biggest and best, but hopefully when people come, they have a good time and they really love their experience and they come back again. That's the goal.
Yeah, Ryan, I've really liked what you've done on social media. I was always big, my days working in the industry was always big on what I called brand journalism approach to social media and PR. And that's exactly what you're doing there. And, you become the media yourself with what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do see it that way, Don. I was a journalist. I was a reporter for a number of years. So I love storytelling, and that goes beyond journalism. I've been, writing short stories and goofy stuff since I was a kid. So I love telling stories. And so that's just another way that we get to do that on social media. And like, what a special place to get to tell stories about, right? 140 years of history.
That's right.
So Ryan, you mentioned that your main goal is to make sure that everybody has a good time at Dorney Park. Dorney Park is known to be family friendly. So how do you ensure that both maybe a small child all the way up to like a thrill-seeking teenager has something to do at Dorney?
Well, that was easy. That's called preserve your hardware and add when you can. So I think that's the other thing too. We were catching a lot of stuff when I first started. It was like all anybody would talk about how long it had been since we built the roller coaster from the ground up. We ended up hitting 19 years, if anybody was counting. But I think what's lost in all that and all that time is all of the investments that we made in areas where it mattered to create a family experience. Planet Snoopy is a perfect example of that. You got 17 rides. All of them are perfectly tailored to kiddos from 2 years old to 10 years old. There is something for them to do in that space. There's Snoopy's boutique. There are places to eat, plenty of rides, and it's right in the center of the park. Super. You walk through the gate, it's right there. And on top of that, improving Wildwater Kingdom, which is a family experience in and of itself. You got the lazy river, you've got Seaside Splashworks, you've got Wildwater Cove. There's plenty to do there. And then even some of the older rides lead themselves into an experience that can be shared with family. And so all of those things working together I think have made us successful and have made us a great park for your family and for your family to grow. And I think the biggest thing this year was saying, okay, we've been doing really well with that experience for folks from 2 to 15 years old. What are we doing for, that 15 plus? Bang, Iron Menace, right? So adding there, I think, was absolutely essential. But, if you looked at a 10-year plan, maybe you wanted to add one more really good thrill, but I see no problem with what we were able to do. And obviously infrastructure is a big part of what we got to do too here in the Northeast, being in Pennsylvania, and being on the creek creates some challenges, flooding and all those unique things. So see that from time to time too, and just shoring things up and making sure we're ready to go for Mother Nature has also been important. But there's definitely something for everybody to do at Dorney Park. And I love that about Dorney. My daughter's been coming since she was little and came, this summer quite a few times, and always finds there's always plenty for them to do.
Yeah, you mentioned challenges, things like weather and other things impacting you there, but you're also located in a state with several well-known amusement and theme parks.
Oh, yeah.
Present another set of challenges.
Yep.
But I think some of the things you just talked about kind of tie into how Dorney Park has stood out and, has faced those challenges.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm trying to explain to people who live in other parts of the country just how close our competition is. Because you start talking about like a Worlds of Fun or a Valley Fair or, virtually any Carowinds, virtually anybody outside of Knott's, they don't really understand, like, man, depending on where you live, Hershey might only be a 50-minute drive. Great Adventure might only be an hour and 10 minutes, an hour. If you got Dutch Wonderland, Sesame Place, Knoebels, they're all within, 90 minutes relative to where you're at. And so you're getting all, and then you've got all the stuff in New York City. You've got the cities, you've got the ocean. There's so much competition. So it's like you said, I think that's what's really important. And I know Knoebels, hat tip to them, has done a really good job too, but preserving our history and our historic rides while being able to add and be dynamic with those additions. I think Knott's is such a great model for us and a park to look up to for sure. I've heard that for years, but I got my firsthand experience there this year to go see it up close and personal. And they do an incredible job as like a community park, not building the biggest and baddest roller coasters or, doing things that maybe their competitors would do it like a Disney or Universal, but just really leaning into like dynamic theming and great food and just all around good vibes. And I think that's certainly a playbook for us. And I think we've done it to some extent and we can do it better. And I think we're driving to that as a team.
Dorney Park, it's part of the newly formed Six Flags portfolio. So how does the park maintain its unique identity within this now larger Six Flags family?
Yeah, I think, we don't necessarily need to get IP crazy and go down that road. I think what we kind of set up ourselves for a 10-year plan that kind of started with Iron Menace, and I really feel strongly about that. Can't really talk about it a whole lot, but I think if we stay the course and we just work on this relationship with our community and expanding and exploring what that is and what that means, growing our charitable outreach, growing our community relationships, talking to partners, getting them invested in the park, getting our community invested in the park, then we'll do really well. And I think if we're going to go into theming, doing things that are reflective and representative of the Northeast and specifically Pennsylvania will bode really well for us. And we know that a lot of our competitors have already established IP and or themes that don't go in that direction. So I think that is going to be a point of differentiation for us. And I think that'll be something that we can excel at moving forward for sure.
So Ryan, guest feedback is a crucial part of any park for its development, for learning, for training, for everything. So how does Dorney gather this kind of information to affect change in the future?
Well, we have post-visit surveys, which are huge. We also have like emails that we send to our pass holders for feedback. And we also have social media. So I usually do a weekly report where I'll gather up. It's great. Got a social media tool called Sprout that helps me pull in a lot of the comments. It doesn't always do the best job sorting through negative and positive. Sometimes it tells me that when someone says like, oh, that's bomb. It might think that's bad, right? When we all know that's good. So, but we go through all those things. We have an all staff meeting every Monday, and we talk about the wins and losses. I usually will filter feedback to appropriate departments, or even my general manager, Jess, if the need arises. So we're constantly watching that, seeing where we can do better. If things really stand out, then we will make an adjustment right there and then. If this is just an example, but if you see one week, you're noticing that people are bathroom X just wasn't up to my cleanliness standard, or that restaurant wasn't moving items fast enough. We'll make adjustments right then and say, okay, park services need to get to that restroom ASAP. We need to change. We maybe need to look at this, or hey, with that restaurant, do we need to add assets? Do we need an extra person or two in that spot? So we can make adjustments on the fly. Same thing if people are like, hey, this ride is really great and the operators are fantastic. We'll go out and we'll acknowledge those operators. Be like, hey, man, we got tons of comments about you guys specifically. And we have some QR codes around our park too that will allow people to submit good feedback about our associates. But we'll acknowledge them and say, hey, pat on the back. We got we got a comment about you, Chris. This is amazing. So I think all those things are good, whether it's good feedback, bad feedback, things that we work on, and we look at it every week, every day to see, hey, are we doing something wrong? Is there something we could be doing better? And I think that once again just kind of speaks to the quality of person that we have working at the park.
Finally, Ryan, if you had to describe Dorney Park in one word, what would it be and why?
Home would be the word I would use. I think for a lot of us, it feels like a home away from home. It feels like you go there and you see old friends and family. And I certainly walk around, and I don't really make it too far usually before I see someone I know, or someone that knows me, or someone that wants to have a conversation or catch up about a ride or talk about the park. I always tell people too, I say home. And for me growing up, one of my homes was my grandmother's house. And I always say Dorney Park's like your grandma's house. You go back and there might be some new furniture and things might be moved around a little bit, but it just feels like grandma's house, right? It still feels like you're walking through the doors of your home. And that is so comforting that you can walk in and you're like, oh man, Thunderhawk's still here. You're walking down the hill. You're still feels like you were 16, 17 years old again. And so Dorney to me is, like I said, home. And hopefully other people feel like that too.
All right. Last question, most important one. Where do you find more information on Dorney Park? What the latest happenings at Dorney Park, and where do you get tickets?
So you got to plug the website, dorneypark.com, if you want to get tickets and all the latest information. But I will plug our social media pages because, always trying to let our guests know that we stay up to date on there as well. So, check us out, Instagram, X, Facebook. We plug threads from time to time. We have some fun on TikTok. But between social media and then dorneypark.com, you get all the information you need, and you can work and plan your trip.
Very cool. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show, talk about Iron Menace, the history of Dorney Park, bringing back some memories of Demon Drop. That was nice.
Nice, man.
But it was fantastic meeting you, and thank you so much. We'll do this again soon, Ryan.
Sounds good, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure. I appreciate you guys hanging in there. Things get, one thing I realized too, it gets really busy when you're opening a brand new roller coaster. And felt like a one-man wrecking crew for a while there. And I got two little kiddos at home, and I coach soccer. And there was a good moment there where it was like I didn't even have 10 minutes to put food in my mouth some days. So it was crazy, but it was fun. So thank you for being patient and having me on.
Awesome. Everybody check out dorneypark.com for the latest information as well as their social media channels.